Number 3. Gladys Stella Kidd. Gladys Kidd was born in 1919. She and her husband, Clella, purchased a farm in Rowan County, Kentucky in 1944. The couple had 2 daughters and a son, and later several grandchildren. Her husband died in 1983. In 1990, Kidd was 71 years old. She was well liked by her friends, family, and neighbors, and was an active member of her local church. She was in good mental and physical health, although she had began talking to her children and grandchildren about selling the farm, as she felt it was becoming too much for her to manage on her own. Her son Charles took her house hunting in the nearby town of Moorhead, but she didn't find any homes that interested her. Unknown to her family, she had already put the farm up for sale at this time. On August 6th, she cashed a check for $56,000 at a local bank, having sold the farm. The bank wanted to give her a cashier's check, but she insisted on receiving the money in cash. At some point in early August, she had cleared out her bank account of another $24,000 in cash from the sale of farm equipment. After cashing her check on August 6th, she loaded up her car with some clothes, a filing cabinet, and $80,000 and drove away from her home. She has not been seen since. Her car was located sometime later parked in town with the keys still in the ignition. 17 days after she had disappeared, her son Charles received a letter from her, postmarked in Lexington, Kentucky. A portion of the letter read, "Don't try to find me. I would just leave. Don't spend money trying. Love, Mom." Similar letters were mailed to her daughter and one of her grandsons. The police initially classified her case as a voluntarily missing adult. Her family suspected that foul play was involved in her disappearance, and law enforcement eventually reconsidered their view, in a large part due to a mysterious boyfriend Kidd had had at the time of her disappearance. Beginning around 2 years before she disappeared, Kidd told her family that she was seeing someone. She would not tell them who this person was. He frequently called her at home to talk, and she often went on dates with him. Her family found it strange that the man didn't want his identity to be known, and what they found especially odd was how if one of them were visiting Kidd, and the man called, he would hang up without speaking if anyone other than Kidd answered the phone. At one point, Kidd told her family that they already knew who the man was, and that they would be surprised to learn his identity. This individual has never been identified. Her family also suspects that Kidd was coached to write the letters she sent them. While they state that the letters were in Kidd's handwriting, they say that the tone of the letters doesn't sound like her, and they find it odd that the spelling and grammar are perfect, despite Kidd only having a 5th grade education. In the years since her disappearance, very few leads have developed. Her social security number has never been used, and her driver's license has never been renewed. In 2007, acting on unspecified information, police searched an abandoned septic tank in Moorhead, but neither Kidd's remains nor any evidence relating to her case was recovered. If she is alive at the time of this video, Kidd would be 99 years old. Number 2. Ben Charles Padilla and Joseph Mikhail Mutantu. In 2002, Maury Joseph, the president of Aerospace Sales and Leasing Company, purchased a Boeing 727 airplane that was grounded at Di Feverino International Airport in the African nation of Angola. The plane was originally an American Airlines passenger plane. It was later bought by a South African company who had removed most of the plane's seating and converted the plane to carry canisters of diesel fuel to remote mining operations in Angola. For a variety of reasons, including concern for the safety of their employees while in Angola, the company had decided to sell the plane, which was no longer in flyable condition. Joseph hired Ben Padilla, a licensed aircraft mechanic and flight engineer from Pensacola, Florida, to oversee a team of mechanics tasked with restoring the plane to flyable condition. The plane was leased by Air Angola, which had failed to make lease payments, so the plan was to fly it to South Africa once it had been repaired. By the spring of 2003, Padilla and his crew had been working on the plane for about 2 months. In early May, Joseph visited the airport to inspect the progress of the repairs, and he gave Padilla $43,000 to pay holding fees to the airport, which he paid and faxed the receipt to Joseph. On May 25, 2003, at around 5 p.m., 2 men were seen boarding the aircraft. One was Padilla, and the other was a member of his crew, a citizen of the Congo named John Mikhail Mutantu. Shortly afterwards, without communicating to the control tower, the plane began taxiing and moved erratically onto a runway without permission. The control tower attempted to make contact with the plane, but there was no response. Without turning on its lights, the plane took off, heading southwest over the Atlantic Ocean. Neither Padilla nor Mutantu was licensed to fly a 727, although Padilla was licensed to pilot smaller aircraft. According to some sources, the plane later made radio contact to ask for landing permission in the Seychelles, an island nation in the Indian Ocean east of Africa, but never actually attempted to land there. Neither the plane nor either of the men have ever been seen again. Because the plane was carrying 14,000 pounds of jet fuel when it took off, potentially making it a flying bomb, and because the incident occurred less than 2 years after 9/11, there was great concern over potential for it being used in a terrorist attack. The incident has been investigated jointly by the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA, which were aided by the governments of the United Kingdom and several African nations, all without avail. In the years since the disappearance, several different theories have been considered. One theory is that the plane was hijacked by terrorists who forced Padilla and Mutantu aboard to fly it. Padilla's brother claimed that he and Padilla had once discussed the possibility of a hijacking, and Padilla's brother said that Padilla had said he would intentionally crash the plane rather than be forced to fly it somewhere against his will. Based on this, his brother believes that Padilla either crashed the plane intentionally, either in the ocean or a remote region of Africa, or that he is being held somewhere against his will. The problem with this theory is that no witnesses report seeing anyone other than Padilla or Mutantu board the aircraft on the day it disappeared. Many American authorities suspect that the plane was stolen as part of a financial scam or a business dispute. However, there is no hard evidence to support this. While Padilla has no criminal record, Maury Joseph has been convicted of forging documents and defrauding investors by exaggerating the profits of another company he ran. However, there is no evidence that he was involved with the plane's disappearance. Another theory is that the plane was shot down by the Angolan Air Force, who then covered up the incident, but there is no evidence to support this theory either. If Padilla is still alive, he would be 65 years old at the time of this video. Mutantu's birth date is unknown, so it is not known how old he would be. The 727 aircraft, which, like the 2 men, has never been located, is the largest aircraft ever to have disappeared. Number 1. Randy Wayne Leach. Randy Leach was born on July 25, 1970. He is the only child of Harold and Alberta Leach. In 1988, Randy was a 17-year-old high school senior in Linwood, Kansas. He was a good student who maintained A's and B's in all of his classes, and he worked part-time mowing lawns. On April 15, 1988, Randy left home at about 6:45 p.m., driving his mother's car, a gray 1985 Dodge 600. He drove into Linwood and picked up Steve Daugherty, a man in his 30s who was an acquaintance of Randy's. According to Daugherty, they drove around for a while, and he drank several beers he had brought with him, but Randy declined to have any. At around 8:30 p.m., they drove into the nearby town of DeSoto to visit a body shop. Randy's parents had bought him a 1966 Mustang as a graduation present, and the car was at the shop being restored, and he wanted to show it to Daugherty. The man at the body shop said that he drank a beer with Doherty, and that Randy again declined a beer when offered. Eventually, Randy and Doherty drove back into Linwood, and Randy dropped Doherty off. At about 9:30, Randy went to a local convenience store where he purchased some gas, candy, and soda. He spoke to several acquaintances while in the store, and all later reported that he was acting normally and seemed happy. After leaving the store, Randy went to the rural home of Kim Irwin, where a pre-graduation party was being held. He arrived at the party between 9:45 and 10 p.m. There were between 70 and 150 people at the party throughout the night, and many people reported seeing Randy there. Randy's cousin said he saw Randy at the party shortly after he had arrived, and describes Randy as being messed up and hardly able to walk. His cousin did not observe Randy drinking anything, and said he didn't smell of alcohol. This was between 30 minutes and 1 hour after he had been seen acting normally at the convenience store. A friend of Randy's, who arrived at the party around midnight, saw Randy several times throughout the night. He said he never actually saw Randy drink anything, but that Randy was acting oddly. At one point, he asked Randy what was wrong, and Randy replied, "Man, I don't know what's wrong." Another friend of Randy's reported helping Randy to his car at around 1:30 a.m., and that Randy had lain down in the front seat. That friend and his brother then left the party to drive a girl home who'd had too much to drink, and when they returned around 2 a.m., Randy and his car were gone. This is contradicted by two other witnesses, who said they saw Randy at the party as late as 2:15 a.m., waiting in line to use the bathroom. The host of the party, Kim Irwin, confirmed this sighting, as she said she asked Randy to relieve himself outside because she was worried he would fall in the bathroom and hurt himself. This is the last time that anyone has ever seen Randy Leach. Both he and his mother's car have never been seen again. On April 16th, Randy's parents awoke at 6 a.m. and realized that he had never returned home. They immediately reported him missing to the Leavenworth County Police. The police went to Kim Irwin's home and reported that the party had already been cleaned up, and they declined to request to search the property. They did eventually obtain a search warrant 5 weeks later, but nothing useful was found during the search. At some point not long after that, the house caught fire and burned down. The cause of the fire has never been determined. Immediately after Randy's disappearance, rumors began to swirl within the community that Randy had been murdered by a satanic cult, possibly at the party itself, and his remains disposed of. There had been rumors of a satanic cult active in the Linwood area long before Randy disappeared, and suspicion immediately fell on Robert Marble, a classmate of Randy's, who was accused by several people of being a cult member. A classmate of Randy's claimed that Marble had shown him a knife and told him that it was the knife used to sacrifice Randy. Police interviewed Marble, and officers searched his car, which contained 2 knives, and a Dungeons & Dragons manual, a game which was falsely linked to Satanism in the 80s. Marble was never charged in connection to Randy's case, and no physical evidence ever linked him to Randy's disappearance. A police investigator reported that Marble was never considered a suspect by most within the department, and there was no evidence that he was a member of any kind of cult. Marble eventually left Linwood in 1989 because he felt harassed by people who refused to believe that he was not involved in Randy's case. Meanwhile, a man in the nearby town of Edwardsville went to the Edwardsville police and claimed that he had been captured by the cult and held captive in a cave near Linwood. He said that before he had managed to escape, he had seen a nude, dead body hanging from the roof of the cave, and he believed that the corpse could possibly have been Randy's. Edwardsville police were prepared to search the cave, but for unknown reasons, Leavenworth County Police threatened to arrest anyone who went into the cave, and the Edwardsville police dropped their investigation. Leavenworth County Police did eventually search the cave themselves, but not until 2 years later. No evidence of any kind was recovered in the search, and shortly afterwards, police used a bulldozer to block off the entrance to the cave. They also claimed that the witness who claimed to have been held captive in the cave had hallucinated the experience while under the influence of drugs. From the early days of the investigation, Randy's parents were upset with how the Leavenworth County Police had handled the case. They believed that the department had initially written Randy off as a runaway and point to the fact that it took the department over a month to search the site of the party and interview partygoers as proof. Shortly after their son's disappearance, several confidential, internal police memos appeared in the family's mailbox. They believed that someone within the department was sympathetic and also believed that the case was being mishandled and was leaking them information. Randy's parents also experienced several other strange events around this time. 4 months after Randy disappeared, his dog, a German Shepherd named Crackers, also disappeared and was never found. Shortly after that, a car that they had purchased to replace the one that disappeared with Randy mysteriously caught fire and burned while parked in their backyard. His parents also believe that police should have taken a closer look at Steve Daugherty, the man who Randy was with before he went to the party. According to Randy's father, Harold Leach, on the morning of Randy's disappearance, he had observed Daugherty drive by the Leach's home several times, traveling about 10 miles per hour in a 55 miles per hour zone. Harold Leach also located several witnesses who reported seeing a man named Jim Hadel, who was Daugherty's roommate, sitting in Randy's car while Randy was in the convenience store before going to the party. Harold contends that police never interviewed Hadel, who, along with Daugherty, was a known drug user who had spent time in prison. Harold also claims that when he attempted to speak to Hadel about his son's disappearance, Hadel denied knowing Daugherty. In March of 1989, Daugherty went to police and led them to a severed human foot on the banks of the Kansas River. He said he had found the foot while taking a walk. Police determined that the foot was not Randy's, and a search of the area turned up no other human remains. Both Daugherty and Hadel have since died, reportedly of natural causes. In 1993, a man who purported to be a research journalist and who went by the names of Terry Martin and Lee Harper offered his assistance to the Leaches. He spent several months without pay interviewing partygoers and others who may have had information in regards to Randy's case, and he pooled his information with Don Weston, a detective with Leavenworth County Police, who had been assigned to review Randy's case. Based on their information, Weston arrested 3 men for the alleged murder and kidnapping of Randy Leach. The men, who have never been publicly named, were quickly released, and the sheriff stated that Weston had been overzealous with her investigation and that there was insufficient evidence with which to hold the men. Weston and Martin/Harper then left the state together for several days, reportedly because they feared for their safety. In another bizarre footnote to this case, this was not the first time that a self-styled investigator had offered his assistance to the Leaches. Shortly after Randy's disappearance, a man from Topeka had offered to help with the investigation, but was found shot to death along with his wife shortly afterwards, in what police labeled a murder-suicide. In 1992, a man named Cheryl Gary Brinkley was convicted for murdering Everett Bishop in May of 1990, a crime which occurred only a few miles from the Leach's home. Brinkley blamed a man named Eric Montgomery for the murder. Both Brinkley and Montgomery were career criminals who had met in prison, and both were in a crime ring together. Before his trial, Brinkley requested the case files of Randy Leach and Lloyd Folsom, who was another unsolved homicide victim from the area. He requested access to the files because he said that Montgomery had killed both Leach and Folsom. His request for the files was denied, and the files of both Leach and Folsom were ordered to be sealed. Montgomery was given immunity with regard to the murder of Everett Bishop in return for his testimony against Brinkley. At his trial, Brinkley claimed that Montgomery and Bishop had killed Folsom over a drug deal gone bad, and that Montgomery had then killed Bishop because he was worried that Bishop would confess the crime to police. He also said that Montgomery was involved in Randy's disappearance. During his testimony, Montgomery claimed that Bishop had killed Folsom, but that he had no involvement or knowledge of what had happened to Randy. Law enforcement officials have said they don't believe that Bishop killed Folsom. In the end, the jury found Brinkley guilty of murdering Bishop, and he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. 14 years later, in 2009, Eric Montgomery was arrested and charged with aiding in the murder of Lloyd Folsom. Montgomery, who was by then in his 70s and dying of lung cancer, was found guilty and sentenced to 20 months in prison, and he died in 2010 while still incarcerated. In 2014, a resident of Linwood named Kim Srubus decided to surf the internet to look for information regarding Randy's case and found information relating to the trials of Brinkley and Montgomery. She decided to contact the Leaches to see if they had been informed about the cases, and the Leaches were shocked to discover that law enforcement had never told them that a career criminal had been accused of involvement with their son's case. In 2017, they filed a lawsuit against Leavenworth County and Leavenworth County Police, demanding the release of all records of investigation concerning their son's disappearance from 1988 through 1992. In 2018, a judge ruled against the Leaches, ordering the documents to remain sealed. Also in 2018, a retired investigator with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation gave his theory on what happened to Randy. He says he believes that Randy drove away from the party, lost control of his car, and drove into Stranger Creek, a waterway in the area. The creek has been searched several times without recovering any evidence relating to Randy's case, and like all the various explanations for Randy's disappearance offered throughout the years, there is no hard evidence to support this theory. If he is alive today, Randy Leach would be 48 years old. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Hopefully you found it interesting. If you did, please like the video, check out my other videos, and subscribe.